Ever get that feeling?
Yeah.
That your curiosity is kind of, pulling you down a rabbit hole.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
one minute you're reading about ancient Rome, the next you're, I don't know, like deep in the science of making bread.
It's crazy, right? How our minds just work that way. Always looking for those connections, those threads to tie things
And
together.
that's what really got me interested in this podcast, the Beautiful Chaos podcast.
Hmm.
It's all about embracing those weird connections, those moments when curiosity takes you off track and you discover something totally new.
What I find really interesting about this podcast is, well, it kind of mirrors the producer's own life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, they're Brazilian, but living in South Africa, working in international health, it's like a mix of cultures and experiences.
Yeah, it's like they're taking all these different viewpoints and experiences and weaving them together.
And here's the really wild part. The podcast is actually powered by AI. So the producer puts together the content, the ideas, but the actual audio, what you hear, is generated by AI.
Wow. That's a pretty crazy combination.
Yeah.
It's like they're right there at the intersection of human creativity and, well, technological innovation.
Yeah. And it kind of speaks to this whole idea of beautiful chaos, doesn't it? This fusion of like totally different things to create something new and interesting.
So for someone who's never actually listened to this podcast, the Beautiful Chaos podcast, what can they expect? What kind of topics do they cover?
Well, they seem to cover a lot of ground. I've heard episodes where they talk about George Orwell's books, examining those classic themes, power, surveillance, the human spirit.
Or, well, those books, they really stick with you. They make you question things.
Totally. And then in another episode, they completely switch gears, talking about the life of Alan Turing, that brilliant mathematician, a code breaker. He was vital in World War II.
Oh yeah, Turing. His story is so fascinating, but also tragic. Such contributions to computer science and AI, but faced so much just for being gay.
It's a reminder, right? Even with all this scientific progress, societal biases can still have a huge impact. But it's also a testament to, well, the human spirit, that drive to create and contribute no matter what.
So we've got Orwell, we've got Turing. What else?
They've also done a deep dive into Brazilian cinema, specifically this film, I'm Still Here, which tells a story about a family during a pretty dark time in Brazil's history.
I'm sensing a theme here. Resilience, facing difficult truths, finding hope.
Seems like it, yeah. They also dedicated an episode to another influential Brazilian figure, the writer Machado de Assis.
I have to admit, I'm not very familiar with Machado de Assis. What kind of writer was he?
He's known for his psychological realism, sharp wit, and how he exposed the raw truths about human nature and society. They really got into his writing style, how he uses irony and ambiguity to create these really layered stories that make you question everything.
Wow, they've really covered some diverse topics.
Wow.
It's like they're pulling together all these threads of culture, history, science, all through this lens of personal exploration.
And it's not just about the individual topics, it's the connections between them. It's the bigger picture they create.
You're right. And you mentioned earlier that they're using AI to actually create the audio. How does that change things for the listener? Does it feel different from a regular podcast?
That's the question, isn't it? It's not just what they're saying, but how it's being said. Does the AI add to the storytelling, or does it create some kind of distance between the listener and the producer?
I see what you mean. I'm also wondering about the producer's choice to use AI. What's the thinking there? Is it a statement about the future of podcasts, or is it more about, I don't know, exploring the creative possibilities of this new technology?
Yeah, that's something I'm hoping we can unpack as we go deeper into this podcast. It's not just the what, but the why. What's the message they're trying to send?
And that brings us to why we're doing this deep dive. We're not just here to summarize some podcast episodes. We want to understand the Beautiful Chaos podcast. Explore its philosophy, see if it lives up to its name.
Exactly. We're looking for those aha moments, those insights that make us think differently about the world.
So let's go back to those individual episodes. This time, let's look for those connections, those recurring ideas that reveal the bigger picture. Let's see if we can find the essence of Beautiful Chaos and why this podcast resonates with people.
I'm ready. Where should we start?
Let's revisit their take on George Orwell. Those books are classics for a reason. I'm curious to hear what new perspectives the Beautiful Chaos podcast brings to them.
Sounds good. Orwell's work is always relevant, especially now with all the talk about surveillance, propaganda, and individual freedoms.
Let's see how they weave those themes into the idea of Beautiful Chaos and what they have to say about our modern world.
So before we jump back into those episodes, I wanted to ask you something.
Sure, what's up?
You mentioned earlier, about the podcast and how it connects these seemingly unrelated topics. But
Hmm.
isn't there, I don't know, isn't there a risk there? Like, could it lead to uh, seeing patterns where there aren't any? Or forcing things together just to make this beautiful chaos idea work?
That's a good point. It's like when you see a face in the clouds, is it really a face or is it just your mind playing tricks on you?
Exactly. So, how can we be sure this podcast isn't just finding these surface level links instead of actual, meaningful
I
connections?
guess that's what we're here to figure out. We need to look at those connections closely and see if they actually, well, hold up.
Yeah. We can't just take their word for it. We need to really listen critically, question their assumptions, and look at the evidence, right?
Okay, challenge accepted. Let's go back to their exploration of George Orwell, 1984 and Animal Farm, and see if they can convince us that these dystopian novels have anything to do with beautiful chaos.
I think they focused on how Orwell's books explored, like, totalitarianism, how language could be manipulated, and the suppression of individual thought. It's
Hmm.
pretty heavy stuff, not exactly beautiful, right?
Yeah, for sure. So how do they connect those dark themes to beautiful chaos?
Well, they made the point that even in those oppressive systems, there are, glimmers of hope, little bits of resistance where the human spirit kind of shines through.
Like what? Can you give an example?
Sure. They talked about Winston and Julia, their affair in 1984. It's this act of rebellion connecting in a world that tries to control everything you do. And they talked about the animal uprising in Animal Farm, that moment of collective hope for something better.
So they're saying even in those dark places, there's still beauty in those acts of resistance and those sparks of humanity that refuse to die out.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a flower pushing through the cracks in the sidewalk. It's unexpected, it's powerful, and it reminds us that life, well, life finds a way.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this ties into the whole beautiful chaos idea. It's not about ignoring the bad stuff or pretending everything's perfect. It's about realizing that life is complicated, messy, full of contradictions, and sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected places.
And they also talked about how Orwell's work can be seen as like a warning about what can happen when we become complacent, when we just conform.
That's definitely something I think about a lot. It's so easy to get caught up in everything, to just go with the flow,
Yeah.
But Orwell reminds us to stay aware, to question those in power, and to fight for what we believe in.
And they tied this back to beautiful chaos by saying that embracing this way of thinking means being willing to challenge things, to question everything, and to look for new perspectives.
So it's not just about seeing the beauty in the chaos, right?
Mhm.
It's about using that awareness to make a difference.
Right. It's about understanding that we're all connected and that our actions matter. It's about accepting the responsibility that comes with seeing this beautiful chaos and using it to make things better.
I'm with you. They've made a strong argument for how Orwell connects to this beautiful chaos philosophy, but I'm still
Yeah.
stuck on the whole AI thing. How does that fit into this?
Well, they say that the AI isn't just some trick. It's a way to explore how humans and technology are interacting, how that's changing.
But wouldn't an AI voice feel less personal, like
Mhm.
less connected to the human side of the podcast?
That's a good question. To be honest, I'm still thinking about that one myself, but you have to remember that even though it's an AI voice, the ideas, the insights, those are all coming from a person.
So it's more like a collaboration, a partnership between a human and a machine.
Exactly. And it's pushing the boundaries of what a podcast can be. It makes us question what authentic means in storytelling.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Like they're saying, hey, the world's changing, technology's evolving, so the way we tell stories is going to change too.
And maybe, just maybe, this whole AI thing is another example of beautiful chaos in action. This mix of human creativity and technology, creating something new and really engaging.
You've got me hooked. Let's see how this all plays out with their exploration of Alan Turing.
Yeah.
His life, his work, it really shows both the brilliant and the tragic sides of what it means to be human.
I agree. Turing's story touches on so much: the power of the mind, identity, the ethics of technology, the fight for justice. It's going to be a fascinating one.
All right, let's do it. Let's see what other beautiful connections they uncover and how this podcast challenges us to see the world in new ways.
Welcome back. It's really amazing how this podcast brings together figures like Orwell and Turing under this idea of beautiful chaos.
It really struck me when you were talking about Turing, about how his brilliance was both celebrated, and then kind of shut down. He helped shorten World War II with his work on breaking the Enigma code, but then later persecuted for being gay.
Yeah. It makes you think about how progress isn't always straightforward, right? Like we make these huge technological advancements, but then we're still held back by prejudice.
It really does. It makes you wonder what Turing would think of the world today. I mean, on one hand, we've got these unbelievable advances in computing and AI, things he pioneered. But on the other hand, discrimination and inequality are still major issues.
It seems like the podcast is saying that this tension, this beautiful chaos, it's just part of being human. It's not
Yeah.
about reaching some perfect world where everything's in balance. It's more about accepting the complexity, the messiness, and finding the beauty in that.
That reminds me of when they talked about Brazilian cinema, that film, I'm Still Here. It dealt with a pretty dark period, the military dictatorship. But it also showed the strength of the human spirit, how powerful family and love can be.
Right. It's about those moments of hope, those acts of defiance and creativity that come out of even the toughest situations.
And when you think about it, that's what the Beautiful Chaos podcast is doing, too. It's taking all these different things, history, science, art, personal experiences, and weaving them together to show the beautiful chaos of our world.
And they're doing it using a tool that some people might even see as chaotic itself, artificial intelligence. It's a pretty bold move, pushing the boundaries of podcasting.
Yeah, I'll admit, I wasn't sure about it at first,
Hmm.
but now the more I think about it, it makes sense. The AI voice isn't trying to replace human connection. It's like it's another part of the experience.
Exactly. It's like they're saying, look, we're not afraid to try new things, to embrace the unknown, to see what happens when we blend technology and human creativity.
I think that's what's so inspiring about this podcast. It's a reminder that curiosity, it shouldn't be limited. It's about following those unexpected paths and seeing where they lead.
It's about embracing the beautiful chaos of learning, of discovery, of making connections we never thought of before.
And for anyone out there feeling a little lost in the chaos of their own life, I think this podcast has a really powerful message. You're not alone. Embrace the complexity, the contradictions, the unexpected. That's where the beauty is.
That's where the magic happens. And that's really what the Beautiful Chaos podcast is all about.
So if you're ready to go on your own journey through beautiful chaos, check out the Beautiful Chaos podcast on Spotify. You might be surprised at what you find.
Happy listening.